I'm with Pete Malin, Director of Friend or Foe. Pete, will you start by telling me a little bit about the project? It's 3 one-act plays that are being presented together under that title, I believe.
Yes, that's right. These are 3 short plays that were all originally written during the First World War. One of them was performed during the war, quite controversially. Another was banned until 1925. And as far as we know, the third one has never been performed at all. They form an interesting contrast. Black Hell by Miles Malleson deals with a young man who's been out fighting at the front, and he's been awarded the Medal for Gallantry after retaking a trench and in the process killing 5 or 6 enemy soldiers. His family are excitedly waiting to welcome him home, but they discover, to their surprise and also to their horror when he gets back, that he is just completely emotionally unable to cope with what it is that he's done to win that medal. So there's a really tense domestic situation in that play. The second play is called X equals 0, rather strange title, but it helps us by having a subtitle, A Night of the Trojan War, and it's by John Drinkwater, who was one of the founding members of Birmingham Repertory Theatre. What Drinkwater does in this play is that he's clearly written a play about the First World War. At the time it was still going on, but he's displaced it to a Trojan War setting, which enables him to deal with it in a different way. It's actually a verse play. Most of Drinkwater's plays were verse plays. He was very, very famous at the time for his output in dramatic verse. It's beautifully written, and it looks at 2 pairs of soldiers, a pair of Greek soldiers in the Greek camp, a pair of Trojan soldiers on the walls of Troy, simply in conversation. And through their conversation, it emerges that these 2 pairs of enemy soldiers are more or less exactly the same as each other. And in each case, it's evening, and one of the pair is about to set off on the nightly mission to kill as many of the enemy as possible. And the outcome of that, I suppose, is not difficult to guess in terms of the balance that Drinkwater creates in that play. The third play is perhaps the most unusual. It's called The Munition Worker, and that basically gives you its subject. It's by an aristocratic lady writer, Lady Amy Byng Hall Smith, who wrote a number of things, including novels in the period, under the male pseudonym of Alec Holmes. This play was published in a magazine at the time called The Englishwoman, and this is the one we don't think was probably performed. The girl who is the munition worker at the centre of the play is from a very poor background. She suffers very ill health, but she has found for the first time meaning in her life by her work making shells in the munition factory. When the matron of the hostel where she lives and the local doctor realise just how bad her health is, they try to convince her that she needs to take time off, and she won't accept it. She demands that she must keep on making her shells to kill as many Germans as possible. Whereas the other 2 plays are quite obviously anti-war plays, the attitude that this play takes, I think, is much more difficult to judge, much more difficult to gauge, and I think it will be really interesting to see how audiences react to it.
So 3 very different, contrasting plays. How did the idea of the project come about? You were involved before it became a Fred project, I believe.
Well, only in as much as it had been mentioned to me by Karen Brown, who is the librarian at the Shakespeare Institute in Stratford, and she'd been working on a project for the Cadbury Research Library, which essentially was rediscovering drama written during the First World War. And knowing that I was a sometime actor and director, she asked me if I might be interested in getting involved with staging these three particular plays, which of all the ones that this project had discovered, she thought were the ones that were most deserving of being performed now. And almost the first thing I suggested to her when she talked to me about these plays was perhaps this could be a project for Fred Theatre. I thought it might be the kind of thing that Fred would be interested in and would do really well.
Pete, we're currently as a nation commemorating the enormous sacrifices that were made during the 1914-18 war. What do you hope Friend or Foe will contribute to those commemorations?
Well, I think those commemorations have been very wide-ranging, actually. In 2014, when there were a great deal of things going on to remember what happened at the outbreak of war and the first months of the war, and there seems to be less happening now as other anniversaries take over, like the 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's death, for example. But clearly the war lasted 4 years, so we are still in the process of remembering the slow unfolding of the events that happened at that terrible time. One of the things, it seems to me, that has been done quite a lot as part of these commemorations is to discover forgotten voices from the time. Letters and diaries and poetry that have languished in private collections, in cardboard boxes, in family attics, and so on. And in a way, this project adds to that because it too is rediscovering forgotten voices. In this case, not just the voices of three playwrights who chose to deal with the war at the time it was happening, but of the characters they present to us on stage, who also have voices that it's really, really interesting to listen to.
I'm guessing this is more than a project of historical interest, and I appreciate it's very early days. You haven't started rehearsals yet.
Nope.
But are you finding any contemporary relevance in the plays?
The answer to that is, I think we will do so as we start to work on it as a group, rather than just myself with a script in the privacy of my own home. But my feeling at the moment is that we are going through very difficult times across the world at the moment, with all kinds of conflicts that are going on. And my feeling about looking at these plays and what they have to say about that conflict from 100 years ago, and looking at the kind of conflicts we face now, I find it quite interesting to wonder whether it is possible to look at those two situations 100 years apart in anything like the same way. One of the things that two of these plays do is to examine the idea that actually the British and the Germans are simply reflections of each other. They are ordinary people caught up in a terrible world-destroying conflagration. One of the things I wonder at the moment is whether it is at all easy now to look at, well, first to identify who or what the enemy is, and whether it is as as easy as it is in retrospect with the First World War to say, well, actually, us, the enemy, we're just all the same, really. I think there's something about the nature of what's happening at the moment that perhaps makes it very, very difficult to do that. I'm guessing that actually at the time of the First World War, for many people, it was just as difficult then, which is why the voices of these playwrights are quite interesting, because they could, even at the time, like many of the war poets, they could see that correlation, that there's no real difference between the human beings involved on the two sides. But now it seems to me there aren't just two sides, there are a whole lot of sides. And understanding where each of those factions is coming from, and what their aims are, what they want to achieve, and the difficulty of regarding them as just the same as us, really. I think that's a huge issue, and I think it's something that we might well end up discussing during rehearsals.
Lovely. Thank you, Pete, for taking the time out to talk to me today. Before we finish, though, would you just sum up in a sentence maybe why people should come and see Friend or Foe?
Yeah, a sentence is difficult. If you know me, you'll know that I work in more than single sentences, but here is my sentence. I think it's going to be a powerful, emotional, thought-provoking evening in the theatre that shows ordinary people facing up to extraordinary situations.
Thank you.